Welcome to the beginner level of motion graphics and animation course. My name is Jitu Moto and thanks for joining me. I hope you are doing very well and that you downloaded Blender from blender.org/download and installed it in your computer through the normal installation process. After you've installed it in your computer, just click on the Blender shortcut and this is what you will see as splash screen. The image on the splash screen may differ depending on when you downloaded Blender and the version of Blender that you are using. So in this case, I'm using Blender 3.00 Alpha, which is still in development. I know that yours might have come as 2.931 and that is okay. Now before we continue, there's some setup defaults that you need to consider. For me, I use right click for selecting objects in Blender since I started using Blender, and so I click on right click, then click on save new settings. Here you will see we have general, 2D animation, sculpting, VFX and video editing. These are different ways to open Blender for different layouts based on what you want to do. In this case we will use general since we want to look at things general before we dive deep into specializing different workspaces. One way to click is just to click on general or click away from the splash screen and you will find, and this is the general layout. Once you are here, there are few things that you need to make sure they are right before we continue. First, come here to the edit preferences and come here to navigation and make sure you check this zoom to mouse position. Mine is already checked, and after you've done that, then also come here to input. If you are using a laptop that doesn't have the numpad, click emulate numpad because we will be using those numbers a lot. Then come here, and if your autosave preferences is checked, no need to save preferences, you just come here and close. Now what you can see here is called the 3D viewport. This area, this is where you do a lot of stuff and where you interact a lot with what you are doing. And for you to navigate through the 3D viewport, you use the middle mouse button. You click and drag and you can see it in all angles, different angles, 3D. And if you want to move from right to left, one way is that you can hit shift on the keyboard and click the middle mouse button and drag like that. Another way is to grab this hand, it's move the view, left click and just play with it, and you'll see that you are panning from left to right or top to bottom. Right. If you want to zoom in to look at the object well at a closer look, one way is by scrolling the mouse wheel. The middle mouse wheel, you scroll it back and forth and you'll see that you can get closer to the object in the scene. You can also use this plus icon here to zoom in and out by left clicking and dragging it. Those are the things that you need to know. Now we set our select mode to right. So if you want to select this object, this is our camera, you right click. You can also come here and right click. So that is how you navigate through the. If you want to see only this side from the front view only without seeing it from 3D, you see this red line here shows that we are along the x-axis, and if you come here you'll see we have x. If I click on this x, it will only show me this face, so X, and you see we can see it straight. These are, if you want to see this side, this, you just come here and click Y, minus Y, and here you have the other side. If you want the top view, Z here, the Z axis. So those are the ways that you move you navigate around the scene. Now on the top here you have different workspaces. Like for example, right now we are in the layout workspace. We have the modeling workspace that is used for a different designed for a different purpose. If I click it, you'll see that we can now see the points of the object. If I grab that one, you can manipulate the object depending on what you want to design. We have the sculpting. This one is used mostly when you want to sculpt, like the way you sculpt to mold using plasticine, but now you're doing it on the computer. So you can this is mainly used when creating characters and cartoons and faces and organic stuff. We have the UV editing, which we'll touch later, texture paint. We have the shading, where you give your object materials color. Then you have the animation, where it is designed for doing animation, but for now we'll just go back to the layout and first understand how it works before we go to the other workspaces. On the top right, we have the outliner. The outliner is where the object in the scene, you can just find them here. Like for example, we have the cube selected in the 3D viewport, and you can see here it's highlighted. If I select the camera, the same case applies to the camera from this side. If I select the light from the outliner, it selects in the 3D viewport. So this one is very useful, especially if you have many stuff, a lot of objects in the 3D viewport and you cannot find them. So you just come here, search for whatever you named it. Like, let's search cube, and here you have it. And if I select it, it selects it in the 3D viewport. This one is very essential later, as you have a lot of stuff in the 3D viewport. Going down to this one, we have the properties of the objects in the scene. Here is where a lot of modification of the objects in the scene happens. Like for example, here we have the location, rotation and scale of the objects in the scene of the cube. You can see the cube here. If I select the camera, it has the location, rotation of the camera, and if I have select the same case. So here you can manipulate, you can also make some, for example, if I move, I drag this number this way, you can see it is affecting the objects in the 3D viewport. That we'll look at it later. We also have other stuff like modifiers. The spanner. We have so much modifiers that are used to manipulate the objects in the scene. We'll get to that practically in our next lesson. So we have the shading. We have a lot of stuff related to the objects in the scene depending on what you want to do. Down here we have the timeline, where you can play the animation, you can play the preview, and it is very useful to preview your animations and also to keyframe. Keyframe meaning to, I'll explain keyframe in the next step that we are going, which is the toolbar. This is the toolbar, and it has tools that are used to when working on objects in the scene. For example, this one is the select box. This one is called the 3D cursor. As you can see, it is located here. It is used if you left click away from the anywhere, you see it follows where you left click anywhere, it goes there. And where it is, it determines where when you add an object in the scene, it will go to where the 3D cursor is. For example, if I add mesh and add a UV sphere, it will go to where the cursor is. If I bring the cursor here, then add mesh, let's add icosphere, it goes to where it is, like so. If I want to undo the steps I've made now, I can come here to edit, undo, or control Z, just like any other software that you maybe interacted with, and like that. So this one is called the move tool. As the name suggests, you can move this object from here to here. So you just left click. If you want to move it along the x-axis, y-axis, you left click and drag like that. You left click and drag, and you can locate your object wherever you want. Down here, the shortcut for location is G, which means grab. So I want to, if I hit G on the keyboard and then move, you see we have and then move the mouse, you can see the object on the scene is moving. If I want to move it along the y-axis using the shortcut keys, I hit G and then Y, or G, X, or G, Z. Then if I'm comfortable with that location, I left click, just like that. So if I hit G, then Y, and I'm not comfortable with where I want it to go back to wherever I took it from, I right click and it undoes that action. So down here you have the rotation. The rotation shortcut is R. So as you can see, if I rotate, I am rotating along the Z axis, I can rotate this way, I can rotate to where I want it to look. So the shortcut is R. If I hit R, you see it is rotating. If I want to lock it along the Z axis or the Y axis, let's try with Z, it is rotating along the Z axis like that. And the same case applies to the X axis and the Y axis and the Z axis. So you have the scale here, and the shortcut for scale is S. If I hit S on the keyboard, you can and move the mouse, you can see I can change here by clicking and dragging along this circle. You see, that is scaling. That is how we scale. If you want to scale along the x-axis, the x-axis is red and the y is green and the z is blue. So I want to scale along the x-axis, so I left click and drag along the x-axis. So you can see I want to scale along the z-axis like that and like that. So as you can see, this 3D, this it's called the gizmo. The way the z-axis is looking and the y-axis and the x-axis, it's called the gizmos. For now, the gizmo it's set along the global, in the global manner, whereby the y-axis is along the y and the z is just the normal 90 degrees straight up, and we have the x on the x-axis straight according to how our world is. But we want to scale it according to how our object is. You can see our object is not aligned to the world, so you can come here to global and change it from global to local. So right now, if I scale along the y-axis, you can see it changes according to how the object is, not according to how the world is. So if I scale along the x-axis like that. Now those are simple stuff that we will learn as we we do practically as we continue doing practices, so make sure you follow along very keenly. Down here we have all the transform, this move, rotate and scale all in one. So if I can move, I can scale, I can rotate without having to change from move. But if you don't want your object to be surrounded with all this stuff, you can just go back to the select box and your object is the way it was. As we are manipulating things here, if I come here to this box, it's called, you hover your mouse above it and see object properties and click, you can see that the location, value, the rotation and the scale are recorded here. So if I come here to move and you look at this, I want to move it along the y-axis, so you look at the y-axis here, so you can see it is changing, and also the rest, like that. If I want to rotate, you can look at the rotation values, they are changing. If I want to scale, the same case. So you can see, you can now track where your object is in the 3D viewport. If you want to bring back your object to where it was by default, like where we found it, without moving or rotating it, you can come here to edit, undo, and undo as many times as possible until you find where you want. But that is a lot of work, so you want to undo the movement, the rotation and the scale. So the simple and shortcut way to do this is hit Alt on the keyboard, Alt and R. Alt, for example, you want to undo the rotation of this object. You see the rotation for this, by now it's on the X is 12.5, on the Y is 117 degrees and 31 degrees for the Z. By default it is usually 0 degrees. So if I come here and put 0, then 0 and 0, you see it is rotate, it go back to where it was. But let me go to Control Z. I don't want to come here and write the values, it will waste a lot of time, so I hit Alt R on the keyboard and it undoes everything. I want the same case to the location, and you remember the shortcut for location is G, so I hit Alt G and it go back to where it was by default. The same case applies to scale, and the shortcut key for scale is S, so you hit Alt S and here we have the default size of how we found our object when we imported it, when we opened Blender. So that is a simple way to navigate around the scene. Now let's move to the next step, which is a simple animation. I want to show you a simple animation so that you finish this introduction part knowing how to animate the basics. So animation means movement of from this position to any other position at a certain time or seconds or frames. Here we are using frames. So animation means at the start of the video of the animation, this object will be here, and then at the end it will be here. As simple as that. So we want to tell this object at frame 1 to be at this position. Then at frame 40 we want it to be at this position. So how do we do that? We go back to the first frame or the 0 frame and hit I. I means to keyframe, insert a keyframe. I, and insert a location keyframe, and you see we have there's something that has popped up here, and this one is to tell you that, to tell the Blender that at this frame 0 we want this object to be at that position, and you see it has recorded here. Then we go to frame 40 and tell Blender that we want this object to be here. So we hit I on the keyboard and insert location. So you see here it has changed. So if I go back, you can see it is moving. You can go back here and move it along the Y and then hit I on the keyboard and hit location. So our object will move this way, so like that, then like that. Then you can play with it as many ways as possible. You can move there, then hit I on the keyboard, then location. So then move here to 160 and back to the default location, I on the keyboard, then location. So if you play the animation like that, and like that, nice. So you can tell Blender that I want these frames to be up to 160 frames, not to 250 by like its default. So you can see here we have the starting at 1 and ending at 250. So we want it to end at 160, and so we input those values here, 160, enter. So our animation will keep on looping like that, like that, like that, like that. Nice. So you see that is very nice. Let's add some other stuff to make it interesting. We want to do the same for the rotation. We want to say at this position we want this object to rotate, to stay that way, and at the end to rotate in a certain angle. So we come here to the rotation, and then hit I on the keyboard and hit rotation. You see a keyframe for rotation has popped up. Then we want at the end of the frame, or at whatever frame you want, we want this object to be rotate along the Z axis, and we want it to be there. Then I and rotation. You see, so if I hit play on the keyboard, you see it is rotating and as it moves, rotating as it moves. Let's do one more stuff. Let's come here to, this time round we will not come to scale, we just come here and use the shortcut. We hit I on the keyboard and hit scale. We want this object at the center of, at that point it will be bigger, so we scale up, then I insert scale keyframe. So that is to tell Blender that when from here it is getting bigger, then we go back and scale it down back again to where it was, then I scale, so it will become bigger, then smaller again, bigger, rotate, then like that. So you can play with it with the keyframes as many times as possible. For if you want to save this, if you want to save that work of keeping on adding keyframes in every step you go, you can, let's delete the keyframes by hitting X on the keyboard and delete keyframes. X is used for deleting, like for example if I hit the X on the viewport and I have selected the box, I hit delete and it is deleted, but now we want to use it, so we hit Ctrl Z and it's back. Now if you can see here, the location and rotation are not where they were, so I hit Alt G and it's at the center at 0, 0 value. So I don't want to keep on hitting I on the keyboard to insert a keyframe. So what do? I insert the first, I hit this round button here. It's called auto keying. It will do the I for you, the insertion for you. So I click on it, and when it's blue, I hit I for the first time and hit location, rotation, and scale. That is all what we did in one to save time. So location, rotation, and scale, and you see it has popped up, and we have all the three transformation properties there. Then we go to, let's go to 40, and then hit G on the keyboard, and let's move to the X along the X-axis like that, and you see automatically it has inserted for us. Let's do the same for rotation, R. Let's try this time round Y. So like that, and it has inserted another one for rotation. So if I go back from the start and hit play, you see it is animating that way. You can do the same for the scale. For you to improve, you try that yourself and see the results. Then for you to save this file, you come here, file, save, and save it in your desk, in your computer where you want to have it saved. So I have this where I save my stuff, and let's call mine tutorial, and hit save Blender file. The other shortcut for saving is Ctrl+S. That is, you see, it shows you that it has saved. Once another tip, important thing that you need to know, when you are through with keyframing until you're satisfied in the animation, you click here auto keying, and you turn off auto keying because it will affect you when you are manipulating other stuff in the scene. So make sure you turn it off. Now in our next lesson, we will know how to set up your camera. Like this is the camera. You can click here to see how it views. This is how our camera is seeing the object in the scene. In our next video, we will know how to get an image to capture an image of the scene using our camera here and setting up the lights. So thank you for following through, and stay tuned, and make sure you practice those few animation and for you to understand the basics of Blender. Then later I will show you how to come up with a good animation and quality stuff. Thank you, and see you in the next video.